Welcome to the NFL Legend Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and today we have a special guest who, in my opinion, should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He started for the Pittsburgh Steelers, won a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Colts, helped lead the Washington Redskins to Super Bowl VII. Please help me welcome to the show NFL legend Roy Sweet Pea Jefferson. How you doing, Roy?
Pretty good, Michael. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, especially when I get to talk to a guy who I think should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Over the last year or two, we've talked to Kenny Easley, we've talked to Jerry Kramer, Robert Brazil. So hopefully we're good luck here and we can get some people to start paying attention.
It would be. I think I'd be very happy for that.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any doubt that you deserve this. From doing research on you, I saw that you were born in Texas, but you grew up in Southern California. Who were some of the early influences on your life, and when did you begin playing football?
Well, I spent my elementary school years in Oakland, California, and my junior high school and high school years after we moved from Oakland to Watts and Compton. We graduated from Compton High School in 1961, and in high school, I thought I was a good ball player, but I don't think I realized I was as good as I became. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
But some of the people, some of the people that, I don't know if I can remember some people back when I was growing up. I'm so old, but I think that Dr. Fred Kennedy, who was a teacher and coach, was one person that really kept an awful lot of us straight and guided us in the right direction. He's passed now, but Kennedy, boy, he was a good man and someone that we admired. He played ball with us and everything, and but I think he was probably the person that I most appreciated giving me the direction, a good direction to follow back when I was young.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize the effect that a high school football coach can have on kids, not so much even with football, but just in their daily lives.
Right. Well, I knew this. He came up to the University of Utah while I was there to visit me. He came out to Pittsburgh when I was playing with the Steelers. I mean, he followed me my whole career, and he was just a guy that I always loved. I mean, he was just like a father to all of us,
Yeah. Now you mentioned Utah. A lot of people wouldn't think you'd go from sunny California to Utah. What was kind of the recruiting process there for you, and what led you to make the decision to attend Utah?
The only school I wanted to go to was UCLA.
Yeah.
And I had a 2.7 out of high school, and back then you had to have a 3 point to go directly to UCLA. So I would have had to go to junior college for a semester and only get a 2 point to get into UCLA, But I don't know. It was a lot of kids in my neighborhood. If they went to junior college, that's where they stayed. There was no going from junior college to to a 4-year school. So I had a cousin, Marv Fleming,
Okay.
who played for the Packers and the Miami Dolphins. He played in 5 Super Bowls. And he was at the University of Utah. And he told me about it, and I got a trip up there. And that's when my first trip on an airplane was to Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I truly loved it. It was a great trip there. I loved the coaches. I loved the players that I met, and that just sold me. And I wound up meeting my wife of 54 years there. Her name is Candy, but we've been together all this time. Like it's been 56 years that we've known one another. But that was the start of Roy Jefferson, you might say.
Yeah, and you talked about the coaches there. I think Coach Nagel was there. He was a really good football coach. You want to talk a little bit about your relationship with Coach Nagel?
Coach Nagel was just a wonderful person, And he was a good man. He went to UCLA.
Yeah.
And and I had told him about my wanting to go to UCLA. He said, "Roy, you made the right choice. I know you. It would have been something great for you, but you made the right decision to come here because we're gonna do some great things." And we did. We really, we really had a great group of guys, and we started. And there was a lot of guys that came there from California. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, in 1964, he had completely turned that program around, and you had some great players there, like quarterback Pokey Allen, running back Ron Coleman, yourself. You want to talk a little bit about that team?
Oh yeah, man. Andy Ireland, I thought was a great running back, but then this little guy, Dr. Ron Coleman, he came in from San Francisco, also, and man, he was a little guy before he had quick feet. And we did a lot of running, more running than throwing the ball, but I'll tell you, we had the running backs, man. We could run on a team all day long and never get tired of it. But Ron Coleman was the starter, and he was a little guy, but he could do it. Andy Ireland backed him up. John P. was a wing back that was a really tough guy. He was from I think Long Beach, but and then of course my sophomore year, Marv and I both were, the starting end. And after he left, then we really started having great things. We went to the Liberty Bowl and beat West Virginia 32-6. When we came to town, the papers said Utah Hoop had a question mark behind it. And then we beat West Virginia 32-6. And and they knew who we were then.
Yeah, and wasn't that game played indoors at the Atlantic City Convention Center?
Right. I think it was the first indoor football game.
Yeah, if it wasn't the first, I know it was one of the first because I think the Astrodome opened around that time, but that was the thing that stuck out to me because I knew you guys had won the game, but when I did a little research, I saw it was at the Atlantic City Convention Center. And was it a 100-yard field, end zones the same size, or did they have to shorten things up a little bit?
The end zone was a little bit shorter. I forget exactly how short, but they were a little shorter than normal. But it was a great field. I mean, and it was a great game too. But
well, not if you're from West Virginia, it wasn't, Roy.
And then there was a running back for West Virginia who came to the Steelers the year after I came there. That was in that game. Oh man, I forget his name. That's what you get for getting old, I guess. But he was. I can remember this kid. You know, he said they thought they were going to run us over. They knew they were going to run us over. But we had a great defense. Oh man, we had a great defense.
Yeah, I think the main running back on that West Virginia team was like Dick Leftridge. Would it have been him?
Leftridge.
Okay.
That is who it was. And he came to the Steelers in I don't know if it was my second or third year, he came to the Steelers. And we used to hang out a little bit together, you know. Big Dick Leftridge. Yeah. He was a big boy, too.
Yeah, and you talk about the Steelers a little bit. Back then, you got drafted in the second round by the NFL with the Steelers. The AFL, I think, was the Chargers that drafted you, wasn't it?
Right, in the second round also.
So what made you go to Pittsburgh?
Well, I decided to go to Pittsburgh just because they were the team, you know, that the AFL had just started, you know, and it just wasn't and I didn't know, you know, I didn't know them very well. I mean, I knew of San Diego because, you know, that's right down, you know, 125 miles from Compton. But I just, you know, it was like I didn't know if they were going to still be there.
Yeah.
And it offered me so much more money, but I just didn't, I didn't think they were going to be a team that were going to be there. So I don't know. Money didn't seem to matter to me at that time.
Yeah, and the thing was, with a wide receiver, you'd have had, I think John Hadel was the quarterback at the time, and Sid Gilman was the head coach.
Right, and the running back, I even worked out with. I forget his name, but they had a running back then that I worked out with, and then Brady Keys was a defensive back with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I also worked out with. But gosh, that's crazy, man. You'd know him if I gave you his name.
You talking about the running back?
Yeah, the running back.
Oh, it was Paul Lowe, wasn't it? Because he ran for over 1,000 yards that year. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they had Keith Lincoln also in the backfield.
Keith Lincoln, but Paul Lowe was from our area, you know. I mean, he was the man, and man, I tell you, it's like I'd always say to myself, I wish I would have, you know. But and what happened was, I wound up coming back playing against San Diego at one point in my while I was with Pittsburgh.
Yes,
and also while I was.
Yeah. So,
but it was the leagues were together. The leagues wound up coming together, and I wound up in the AFL anyway, or the AFC anyway. You know.
Yeah.
I said, "This is nothing." I turned down all that money, and I wind up in the AFC anyway.
Yeah, looking back, any regrets on choosing that? Since you know Gilman, Hadel, hell, they had Lance Allworth. It'd have been you and Lance Allworth.
Lance
back
Allworth,
there.
yeah, I know. There's a lot. I mean, it was a great team. I followed it when I was coming up, but no, I didn't have any. You know, it was the only regret I had was that I didn't get that kind of money. You know, because I was offered $200,000 signing bonus with the San Diego Chargers, and I got a $15,000 signing bonus with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, and you go to Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh wasn't the greatest place in the world to be playing football in the mid-'60s either.
Well, I didn't know. I mean, I just knew I wanted to be in the NFL.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with, like San Diego was the team back then.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to go to a championship team, that's where I would have gone. But it was NFL versus AFL, and that was I knew the NFL. I didn't know the AFL, even though they just hadn't been around a long time.
Yeah, they'd only been there 4 or 5 years at that time, and you never know how that's going to go. So the AFL may have been, paying more money, but the NFL was the safer bet. You knew it was going to be there. So I could completely understand why you did that. Yeah, and if you look at it today, the Pittsburgh Steelers are considered a model franchise. Not so much in the mid-'60s.
Right, absolutely.
So what was that like for you there? I mean, what was your relationship with Art Rooney?
Well, I had a good relationship with the Rooneys, especially the old man. Dan and I didn't see eye to eye because I was asking to renegotiate my contract every other year, and so we got off a little bit on the wrong foot. And I also would go in sometime and ask him how come he could pay, players who weren't starters more money than guys who were starting on the team. And they were younger guys, And I said, how do you? And he told me that wasn't my business.
Yeah, because back then people forget there's no free agency. Basically, if you move from one team to another, you either got cut or you got traded.
Right, and you didn't have, there was no union. The union started just the next year or the year after or something, And so I told him, I said, well, maybe if I talk to I talk to the papers that that somebody else might want to listen to me since you don't want to listen to me.
I'm sure he liked that.
Oh no, he didn't like that at all.
Yeah, so your first 3 or 4 years there, the team's really bad. 1969, they had a great draft. They had a new head coach, Chuck Noll. I know I've read that you and Chuck Noll didn't exactly see eye to eye. You want to talk a little bit about that transition and your relationship with Noll?
Yeah, Noll was one of those old coaches that he was a good coach, absolutely. He's a Hall of Famer, but he and I didn't see eye to eye. I guess I was the player rep also, and we struck, that year, and he didn't like the fact that the young guys, I was in my 5th year at that time. They all looked, he said they all looked up to me, and that it wasn't a good fit, for me to be there, and he and guys looking up to me. And he thought that wasn't a good thing for his team, So, I mean, I could understand where he's coming from, all right? But I wasn't going to change, and so that was the reason for the trade.
Yeah, and I don't even think people realized there was a player strike in 1968. And I think it was the first one. I think it was led by John Gordy, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were. We wanted. I don't know. There was. I don't know. I can't even remember everybody's. It wasn't Gordy.
Yeah, he was the president of the NFL Players Association, and he had helped found it also.
Garvey, not Gordy. Garvey was the name of the guy, of the president of the Players Association. He had just come in. He was where was he? I think he was from Wisconsin or somewhere. But Garvey is his name, not Gordy. Gordy. And he was he's the one that did that. And Gene Upshaw was part of it too. You know, he was a player. He was a player, the player president, and we and so the coach Noel didn't like that fact that I was able to get the guys. He didn't think his guys would walk out, but I got them to walk out. Only one guy, a punter, stayed out.
Yeah, and then you look, I mean, I assume your relationship with Noel is, didn't you ask to be traded and gave them a choice of like 3 teams you would like to go to?
No, it wasn't. Not there. That was when I went from Baltimore to Washington.
All right, so
Rosenthal they made their deal with the Colts, and I was happy to go. You know,
yeah, it had to be awesome to go from the worst team to maybe the best team.
Yeah, but I didn't know that was going to be the case, you know. But Baltimore had been to the Super Bowl just 2 years earlier, you know. So, I didn't look at it like, man, I'm going to a great team, you know. I was just upset with the fact that I was being traded, and I thought I was a great player, you know.
Yeah.
How can they trade me? How can they trade me? I'm Roy Jefferson, you know. And so I had to get over that and got to Baltimore, and man, I tell you, it gave me new life, you know. These are guys that I had played against, but hey, I got to prove myself here. So I mean, man, they got the best out of Roy Jefferson when I got there, buddy, because I was doing it. You know, I made sure that I showed them that they got the better part of this deal.
Yeah.
And so Johnny U was an unbelievable coach. I mean, unbelievable quarterback. John Mackey was my roommate.
Oh, John Mackey, maybe the greatest tight end to ever played a game. You want to talk about your relationship with him?
Yeah, Mack was a great guy, man. We got along real well, and I mean, you think you're supposed to get a lot of sleep before a game? Man, Mack and I would sit up talking about any and everything until the wee hours of the morning, you know, and before we'd go to sleep. But he was just a regular guy too, you know. And this guy, I mean, he was superstar, you know. He was superstar as far as I was concerned. And so I really loved John Mackey. He was a guy that was an intelligent guy and just a good person, and I love that about him. He everybody likes John.
Yeah, the thing about John Mackey is he was a guy that would have fit in today's game at tight end, but he played in the '60s. I mean, he was the first guy that was like Gronk or a Kellen Winslow.
Right, you know, because they didn't throw the ball as much in those days, you know. And so if he had been in the era, you know, now, man, he'd wear these guys out because they couldn't tackle him. Once he got the ball, they could forget it. He'd run over people. I mean, just run out of their grass, knock them down. He was unreal.
Yeah, and after the 5 years in Pittsburgh, I mean, I'm sure you still have special memories of playing in the Super Bowl. What stands out most from that game to you?
Well, I tell you, I was so excited that, I just knew we were going to win. It was a battle, that we had with the Cowboys there, but I knew we were going to win. I just knew we were. And even when Johnny Unitas got hurt, they took him out. The quarterback.
Yeah, Earl Morrall came in and replaced
Earl
him.
Morrall.
Yeah.
Man, you see where my head is today. I can't. Earl, hey, I loved Earl. I mean, but Johnny U was even he was masterful. We worked on a hook and go pattern in practice, and he say things about what he wanted to see in my route. He wouldn't tell me exactly how to run it, but there's one aspect of it that he wanted done, and it's like we were playing a team, let me say, because I can't remember exactly, but what he said in the huddle was, Jefferson, we worked on this in practice now. I want to hook and go, but I want you to make sure that when you make that turn to come back to me, that you see me before you go back up the field. And man, just little stuff like that. He'd call the play, and then he mentioned that. And then I went down. I made sure that I was, I saw him after I made my turn and cut up the field. The guy went right by me. He thought he had an interception, and I caught it in the end zone, TD. It seemed like it was, it seems like it was Green Bay, but I'm not sure. But I know that was the play, and that's how it went down. Now Earl Morrall, Johnny U went down in the Super Bowl, and Earl Morrall comes in, and he had come in periodically during the season when Johnny get hurt or something. But he came in. Oh man, he just took control. It was just you didn't know Johnny had left. He took control of the game, and buddy, we went crazy when that horn blew. It was a great feeling to have won the Super Bowl, and it was like well, my buddy Ray May, he said, how did he put it? He says, from the outhouse to the Super Bowl, I forget I don't know. I forget the other term, but he says, man, we really did it. Because Ray May was the middle linebacker.
Yeah.
One of them, we played a 3-4. And so he was in Pittsburgh with me the year before. So we both won one game the last year we were with Pittsburgh, and he was there the year before, and we won 2 or 3. So man, we just man, we were so happy when that game was over with and we had won the Super Bowl.
Now, you only stayed 1 year in Baltimore. You ended up being traded to the Redskins. From what I heard, you didn't really get along well with owner Carroll Rosenblum.
Well, it wasn't that I didn't get along with him. He lied to me. He says, I asked him, not a week, within a week of coming there, I got a meeting with him. I told him, I said, Mr. Rosenblum, I just signed a 3-year contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this trade was a surprise to me. And I said, now, I would like to have an opportunity to renegotiate my contract if I have a good year and the team has a good year. And he says, oh, no problem, and there's no problem with that. We'll see what happens. we'll talk about it at the end of the year. Okay. So I go home. We went back to L.A. after the Super Bowl, and I see an interview in the paper in the L.A. Times with they had 3 coaches or something, and they were interviewing them and asking them questions about the Super Bowl and why they think the Baltimore Colts won it. And every one of the coaches made mention of my name.
Yeah.
Them getting Jefferson and solidifying that passing attack was really, a key component to them winning the Super Bowl, going all the way and winning the Super Bowl. I said, oh, yeah, I cut that article out. I go back home. I go back to Pittsburgh because I didn't move from Pittsburgh to Baltimore. We were still in Pittsburgh. So I went to Pittsburgh, drove to Baltimore, and talked with talking to Carroll, and he says, oh no, I never renegotiated contracts. I said, but sir, you didn't say that when I had a meeting with you at the beginning of the year. He said, well, he just shrugged me off. He says, well, I don't renegotiate contracts. Well, I can't tell you what I told him, but what I ended it with, if I don't go to L.A., San Diego, Washington, and I forget the other team. I listed 3 or 4 teams. So I said, if I don't get drafted, if I don't get traded to one of those 4 teams, I'm playing. I'll be teaching school next year. You won't get anything for it. And I left. And then they kept, that was right after the season. Now, they kept calling me when the season was getting ready to ramp up, and I didn't show up to training camp and all that. They started calling my house. Well, I wouldn't answer the call. They talked to my wife. My wife says, well, he says when he's traded, he'll go on and go to the team that you trade him to if it's the right one. And he just, they were expecting that I was coming on back, and that. So then they call, they call like 4, 5, 6 times, and then the next one time they call and they said, well, we think we have a bite with several teams, but they want to see that you're healthy once you come on in. And I did. I came in, and the team that won the Super Bowl would play the college All-Stars. Yeah. And so I came in, and McCafferty, the coach, told me, he said, Roy, I'm gonna start Perkins in front of you because we know you're not going to be here. And he says, but be ready because I'll get you in there early, and I'll get you in there with Johnny. And so after about 1 or 2 series, he told me, he said, Roy, okay, go on in with him this time. He says, I told Johnny to make sure he gets the ball to you. And so they threw me about 3, 4 balls, and I think I caught a touchdown pass. I'm not sure, but I had a good run of balls that I caught. And then when I came out, he said, well, Roy, I think they know that you're all right. So I'll send Perkins back in. You can rest the rest of the evening. I said, thank you, Coach. And that's how that went with Baltimore. I love those guys. I love that team. I love the city. But now they finally John Mackey was the one that told me. He said, well, homeboy, you went to the Redskins. I said, right on. And they trained close to where we trained, in preseason. Yeah. So I was able to drive over you know, when the trade was done, I just drove over, and I had a red Cadillac with a white leather seat, white vinyl top, and I drove up to the thing, and I had on a loud jumpsuit. You know, it's like a tank top on the top, you know, and bell-bottom pants, real tight from the knees up, and then they flared, you know, the bell-bottoms. And I come up there with I had this little tam on and a purse, a rawhide purse with rawhide strings from that purse going down to the ground. And I came over there and looked into the park and looked at the field, and they were out there training, you know, having a practice. So I got out the car, walked in, talked to the trainer, and he said, you know, Roy, I'm sure they don't want you to come out dressed now because they're there. Why don't you just go on out why don't I take you out to the field and introduce you to the coaches, you know? And so I did, okay? Well, then I'm gonna tell you about what Ron McDowell.
Yeah.
Ron McDowell at a luncheon was introducing me at this luncheon of about 200 people, and he says, and he tells this story. He says, you know, when Roy came, you know, he drove up with this red Cadillac, and he had on this outfit with this purse and had this tam on. And he started going, he said, George Allen always told us, whatever you want, I'm going to get it for you. He says, whatever we need, I'm going to make sure we have it. And Ron said, he told the guys, he said, hey, guys, George Allen got us a pimp. He got a pimp for us. I died, man. I was embarrassed, but I died.
Yeah, and when you get there, I mean, the Redskins hadn't been to the playoffs in a couple decades, I think, but with George Allen being there and the success he had with the Rams, you had to know you're going someplace where you were going to win.
Yeah, man, he was, you know, George was a corny guy, though. You know, he was a corny guy, but he was repetitive, and he had long practices, and I didn't know if I liked that until I was there for about 2 weeks, you know, and then I understood what was happening. George had long practices, but we didn't have a whole lot of contact, you know. We didn't scrimmage a lot.
Yeah.
Most teams I was on, man, we were scrimmaging all the time. Well, George didn't do that. He had older guys, you know, and he had guys that played in the league for a while and knew what they were doing. But what he did was he went over and over and over things with the offense and the defense until it became instinctive, man. And so we very seldom made mistakes. That was the key to our, you know, because they broke down teams, man. They knew exactly what to do and how to do it on offense and defense. And so we were just very successful. They were very successful in getting us to do the things that were necessary to move the ball against the team and to stop a team. And, you know, that was the name of the game. George was, you know, he just said, hey, if my guys know what they do and how they do it, they can stop them, or they can move the ball against them. So it was as simple as that. And George did it well.
Yeah, and you guys had some great players when you were there. And the first year there, I think you guys lost to the 49ers in the playoffs. But the second year, you guys you play the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game after playing the Packers. You want to talk about a little bit of that Cowboys-Redskins rivalry with George Allen and Tom Landry?
Oh, man, George hated the Cowboys. He told us one time, he says, and we were in a meeting, he says, man, I wish that I wish that me and Tom Landry could get out on the 50-yard line and fight. That I would put him.
That might be the most boring fight of all time, Roy.
He says I would whoop him up and down the field, boy. And he was just, guys just fell out laughing, And he was, and you know what? And he had just had a karate lesson. This guy used to come out and give him a karate lessons every, couple of times a week, And he was a famous. He had 3, 4, 5 schools in the area. And so George would have him come out a couple times a week, and he would go through some things with him early in the morning, like twice a week. And he came in with his, I don't know what they call it, the dojo or something.
Yeah.
With his outfit on one day, and in our meeting, and that's when he came up with that, that idea of him and Tom Landry getting out on the 50-yard line and doing it. George was he was an okay guy. I didn't initially. I wasn't sure about him, but George was a good coach, and he was a good man.
Yeah,
and he wanted to win for him.
Yeah, and that wanted to win for him. Did that play into one of your greatest games you ever played? You had the Redskin-Rams game. I think that was a Monday Night Football game, too, where you just went off. I think you had 7 or 8 receptions, 138 yards. Do you recall that game?
Yep. I was at home, buddy. It was at the Coliseum. I was at home. I guess I probably got about 50 tickets, for family and friends. And it was, I loved it. And I got the touchdown on, I had a pretty long touchdown against Kermit Alexander, who's a good friend of mine. He went to high school in Santa Monica while I was at Compton. He played against my cousin, Mark Fleming, who was 2 years ahead of me. They were both 2 years ahead of me, and they played against one another. But no, I think I might have played 1 year against Kermit, because Kermit might have been 1 year behind Mark, and so we played against one another also. But it was a great game, man. Let's see. I don't think it was. I think wasn't Billy the quarterback? I don't know if Sonny.
I think Billy was the quarterback in that game.
Yeah, and Billy went to UCLA, so I would have. I used to watch Billy when I was in high school. I thought I would be there. I was going to be playing with him, because I was figuring on going to UCLA, but I wound up going to Utah. But that was, just a great game. After the game, I had buddies and friends and family, like deep, like 50 people, and to have had such a game was just you couldn't have scripted it any better.
Yeah, and that game had to be a big deal for Coach Allen too, considering his history with the Rams.
Oh, absolutely, man. Oh, George, all week long, man, George he was pumped up. And he was, every meeting was important. And don't anybody, get out of place or not be listening be messing around while he's in. Oh no, he was all over you, boy. But he would tell you, this is an important game for us, and he wouldn't say anything about it being an important game for him, but we knew it was,
Yeah.
But then he had like, what is it, 8 players or something like that from the Rams.
Yeah, he brought him with him.
For the Rams,
yeah.
On our team too, So that they're besides, besides George getting us pumped up over it, those guys were talking trash too, And
the thing is the thing that stands out to me is I've interviewed a lot of guys that have played with the Rams, Redskins, that have played for George Allen, and every one of them absolutely loved playing for him. When it was, I interviewed, you remember Eddie Metter played for the Rams. He was a DB.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's another guy that I think has a claim for the Hall. And then Mike Bass, who was your teammate, I had him on a year or two ago. And just the things that they say about Coach Allen, you can tell why he won so much. It was because all these players knew that their coach really did care about them, and not just on a football level.
And but the key to George was, and it came across. It wasn't that he told you anything specifically, but it came across that he knew what we needed to do to win, and it sort of permeated to you that he knew that, and that you just had to listen to what he had to say and do what he said to do, and you would win. And that's half the battle of getting across to a bunch of young guys,
Yeah, and then we talked a little bit about that 72 championship game where you guys dominated the Cowboys to go to Super Bowl 7. So this is kind of a twofold question, because I know Marv, who you've talked about, Marv Fleming, played for Miami. You, of course, were a Redskin. What do you remember about that Super Bowl, especially going up against Marv?
Well, I was excited, ready to roll, I guess the key was that we kept trying to run the ball against Miami, and they did a control thing, where they were hitting and controlling and not trying to beat their man, and that's what and that's how they kept us from running the ball well. And George and them wouldn't throw the ball as often as we should have to make them try and come in and beat. If you're trying to beat a guy, it's easier to block him.
Yeah, and the thing is this: the thing that stands out to me when I've watched the game is the fact that it's really hard to win a game when you let the other team dictate the pace of the game, which is what you guys did in that game.
Basically, that's basically what happened. We tried to run, and they knew that. See, because even though we that's what we do. That's what we always did. Is we run and run and run, and then we throw a pass or something. Maybe throw a pass here and there. But this here, man, we just ran. So that's what they were defending. The front seven were defending the run, and they played that zone and just figured that they could, stop everything from Billy with that zone defense, and that's what and they were successful at doing that.
Yeah,
but we still had a shot,
Yeah. Garo Upremian almost kept you in the game by himself, and he was on the other team.
I know, and we were favored in that game.
Yeah, by I think 3 or 4 points.
We were favored in that game. That was wild.
Yeah,
I don't know how they.
Well, I think it was
that.
just the fact that everybody considered the NFC tougher than the AFC, and if you look at the Dolphins' schedule that year, they'd only beaten 1 or 2 teams that had made the playoffs, and if you or 1 or 2 teams that had winning records, and if you look at them in the playoffs, they barely beat. I think it was Cleveland and Pittsburgh by like 3 points each.
But they were. I don't know about Cleveland, but Pittsburgh was a good team. Man.
Yeah.
But they were young. Pittsburgh was young. They just, they had just started their vaunted.
Yeah, because that was the first year they, I think, made the playoffs in 40 years. Was that 72, and they played the Dolphins coming off of that immaculate reception. And I think thing people forget is 72. Even though the Steelers, I think they were 10-4. And Miami was 14-0. Pittsburgh still hosted the AFC Championship game.
It was. I mean, those were the years, and those were the days.
And it was a hell of a lot better back then. One other guy I wanted to talk to you about would have been the wide receiver on the opposite side of you, Charlie Taylor. You guys were one of the best 1-2 combinations in NFL history. You want to talk a little bit about Charlie?
Yeah, Charlie and I go back to college. He went to Arizona State, and we played them. We played Arizona, so I was very familiar with Charlie from his college days. And when I also ran track, so when I'd go, during the break. Our spring break, we would go down and go to Arizona State, New Mexico on our break to run track meets. And I would hang out with Charlie. And we got to know one another then, before we ever we got to know one another off the field because of my being running track and going down there, at least twice, I think. And then my last 2 years, I didn't run track. But that's when I first ran into him, and got to, actually fraternize with him. But Charlie, man, he had such quick feet. Oh man, that was his MO. That was like. When people move their feet in patterns against you, and they start moving their feet real quick, that confuses a cornerback, and that shakes the cornerback, and they hold up like they think he's running, but he's running, and he starts running running his feet real quick, almost in place, but he's actually going forward. Man, and that just confuses the cornerback, and when that happens, he makes that cut, and you can forget it. And he could cut on a dime, So he was unbelievable with the ball, when he got it.
Which brings us. You played a couple more years with the Skins. I think you retired in 1976.
Correct.
Okay, so was the adjustment to life after football difficult for you, or?
Oh no! See, we didn't have, we worked during the off season.
Yeah.
So we didn't have. There wasn't a problem in getting ready for off season things, And then I had, I also, I worked with Stewart Title, a mortgage company. For quite a while, but the key things, or the things that I did that I was excited about, was I had a children's TV show called It's Elementary, that it was for 3rd to 5th grade, and we would it's like It's Academic,
Yeah.
The producer's mom did its academic. And so this was an elementary, its academic was the high school portion. This was an elementary portion that they put together. And so I hosted that for, I don't know, about 2-3 years before I was foolish and, I don't know, got angry with the producer and didn't, I wish I hadn't, but that was a way back when. I also had a barbecue restaurant for about 12 years, and that went very well. And we did a lot of things in the community with that also. And then I had, what was the other children's? I had another. I was able to put together with a young man a children's learning center that we get 3rd to 5th graders and assist them in reading. And the kids would come. Downtown. Their parents would bring them on K Street. We were able to get a nice room there, and I had a lot of volunteers, man, and some great volunteers that would help the kids in their reading. And we assisted young kids in reading, tutored them in reading, and we were able to, we had kids that were, in the 3rd, 4th grade, reading at 6th and 7th grade level by the time they finished with us. So those are two situations that I was very happy about after my retirement.
Yeah, and I assume that education is really important to you, because the thing that I read that really stood out to me over all the football numbers, tell me if this is true or not, because not everything you read on the internet is, but I read that you returned to Utah in 1970 to complete your bachelor's degree.
Absolutely. My mom.
You there?
Okay. Yeah, my daughter knows how I get, but my mom wanted me to get my college degree, and so that was something that I definitely had to do. I did, and I only needed 15 units to complete, and I did it, and so, I'm sorry, but
that's all right. I completely understand this.
But yeah, man, my mother was a special person. She graduated from high school when she was 16 years old, and only because her older brothers and sisters didn't get a chance to go to college did she not go to college.
Yeah.
But all of her children read before they went to kindergarten. All of them. All 7 of them. And that was the thing. She didn't want anybody slacking with their education.
Yeah. And that's what we lack a lot of times in today's society. I mean, it doesn't seem like the things that were as important when we were younger are as important now.
I know, man. It's such a travesty sometimes. I mean, I just saw on TV here earlier today a kid who was going to school, but he was somewhat infrequent, but the coach saw is he was a good athlete, and he would, you know, he was sort of a pet peeve of his. He wound up getting close to him, and he found out that the kid was homeless.
Yeah.
He didn't have a home, but he was still trying to go to school. So he talked his wife into letting him have this kid come live with them. And he was a black kid, and this coach was white, married, and they took him in. This kid, in his first year, got a 4.0, and he was the quarterback of the football team. That was, I mean, that was, God, that was just an absolute great story.
Yeah.
I didn't get to see it all. I just happened to see the important part of that, you know. But my daughter was looking at that, and I caught it. And just, oh man, that's just such a great thing, you know, to see a kid that homeless was able to turn his life around with the assistance of a coach and his wife, and he flourished.
Yeah, and when we look at it now, we'll segue kind of into. I've talked about it. I wrote an article about it a couple years ago, but I think you're a Hall of Famer. Just from my dad telling me about watching you play, and then everything I read, the film I've seen. I know you were considered kind of a rebel when you were playing. Do you think that's what's hurt you?
Yeah, I'm certain it did, you know. But I've got, you know, when you mentioned that, I have you on speaker. So when you mentioned that, my daughter is putting her hands up, yay! When you mentioned the Hall of Fame, and then I've got a godson and his buddy. My godson works for NBC out in Colorado, and the other young man, Andre, Jude Pago is my godson, and Andre lives down in Atlanta. He has his own film business. He does a lot of documentaries, and they're doing a documentary on me.
Yeah.
They begged me to let them. Said, Dad, we want to do a documentary on you, show all the things that you've done in your life, and we're gonna get some highlight films, and they're gonna cut them up and put them as part of it. And they said, and this is going to be our contribution towards you going to the Hall of Fame.
Well, you know, I interviewed Robert Brazil a couple years ago and asked him the same question. And at that point, 2 years ago, nobody was even mentioning Robert Brazil. And then all of a sudden, there became a groundswell to get him in. And, I mean, Robert Brazil, to me, was Lawrence Taylor before Lawrence Taylor was. And when I watch you, I think a lot of times, especially receivers in the 60s and even defensive backs, 60s and 70s, since the ball wasn't thrown as much, nowadays, for a guy to have 500 receiving yards in his career or 5,000 receiving yards is no big deal because of the way the game's played now. And people don't realize that when you played, a defender could harass you, put their hands on you all the way down the field, and you had to do a little bit more to make your catches. And as you said, you played on teams that predominantly like to run the ball.
Right, that's true. That combination, not throwing the ball much, and then being on teams that ran the ball quite a bit, you know, could hurt a lot of wide receivers in that area. You know. But like, you know, the other key though is that, you know, I didn't, you know, there weren't a whole lot of. I didn't play with a whole lot of great quarterbacks. I didn't really have a good period in Pittsburgh until Dick Shiner came there. He came from the Washington Redskins. He had backed up Sonny, and he came to Pittsburgh in 1968. And those 2 years, I made All-Pro and went to the Pro Bowl. So
yeah, and if you look at it, Unitas, Kilmer, and Jurgensen were all at the end of their careers when you got to them.
Right. But I want to say that maybe because Dick Shiner's son sometimes communicates with me, and I hope he listens to this. I'm not sure exactly where he lives, but Dick Shiner is put Roy Jefferson on the NFL map in 1968. I mean, I was starting to come out in '67, but in 1968 when he got to the Steelers, that Shiner put me on the map. Those 68 and 69 years, and I'm very thankful to him.
Great and he's a guy people forget about too because he was kind of pushed out when they drafted Terry Hanratty and Terry Bradshaw. So he gets forgotten too. And I mean, that's the reason we do these shows for guys like you, Eddie Metter, Dick Bass, who are all legendary players.
And Dick Bass, I knew Dick Bass when I was in ninth grade.
Yeah.
9th, 10th, 11th grade. He dated a friend of mine's sister. So I knew him, man, all the while he was there with the rent. But he didn't make it into the Hall of Fame.
No. And I mean there's a ton of guys out there like that. I mean
he was so bad. I mean he could do a little guy too, And we was, and he was, here these three guys, we were the Three Musketeers, Bub Crump, Elmer Dixon, who's Ibrahim Muhammad now, and myself. We, when we knew that Dick Bass was coming over there, they tried, Bub's sister would try to hide it because she knew we would be over there under his feet if we knew he was coming over, But
and I basically we do this show because we want we want you guys to be able to tell your stories to everybody, and we want people to realize that the NFL just didn't start at the start of the century, which when kids are under 30 years old, they have a tendency to not know what's going on. And I think the biggest problem with this world now is people don't realize there was a history before they existed. And the reason the NFL is huge today is guys like you, Bass, Metter, Roman Gabriel. I mean, all these guys that played when, as you said, you had to have a job also. So you guys played because you absolutely loved to play the game. And I think people lose that. And to me, it was the greatest time in sports, no matter what sport it was, because it wasn't guys out there just trying to get paid $10 million. These were guys that, and from when interviewing them, when they talk about their teammates and they talk about their former coaches, it's different than talking to a player today and listen to them talk about the people around them. Because it seems like in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, your teammates were more important. They were really like brothers.
Oh yeah, man. We were a really close team. The Redskins especially. Well, even in Pittsburgh, we were really tight. And even the one year I was in Baltimore, we had a good group, man, and we'd hang out together. And guys loved one another, loved playing with one another. And I don't know. It was another time, man. And I don't get that feeling like when I go out to Redskin Park or go down to the Ravens and go over to the Ravens and stuff. I don't get that feeling, like we had when we played.
Yeah, it doesn't even seem to mean as much to the fans.
Mm-hmm. But The fans are going to go no matter what.
But what I'm saying is this: a lot of things these days are just tied up in. Well, I'm going to watch. He's on my fantasy team. I mean, it's not. There's not the connection between the fans and the players and the team the way it used to be.
Yeah, it isn't. Yeah, there isn't a direct connection like there was back then. The money has made it a difference. The money has just made this group of guys a little different.
Yeah.
And the free agency where guys are not with the team very long. All the guys that I played with in Pittsburgh and in Baltimore and with the Redskins, those teams were together for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that was excommunicated, But there was, like the when I went to the Colts, man, that was a team that George Allen would have loved because they had guys, that were. Let's see. At that time, I was in the league 5 years. Okay, they had guys anywhere from 8 to 14 or 15, 16 years in the league.
Yeah.
Up that team, and then I go to the Redskins, and George Allen brings a bunch of guys from L.A. who had been in the league 10, 11, 12, 13, or 14 years already. So I was a young guy with both Baltimore and the Redskins. So it was those old guys, man. They know how to play the game.
Most definitely. All right, Roy. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up, but you're welcome back on here whenever you want. It was an absolute honor to have you on the show today.
Thanks, man. Jude Pago, who you talked to?
Yeah.
He's my godson. I don't know. Did he tell you the story of how he and I met?
A little bit, but not a lot. But if you want to tell it, I would love to hear it.
Okay. I met Jude in 1976 or 78, right in that time span. But not him first. His mother went to church with my wife, the Seventh-day Adventist church, and the father had 6 of her kids up in Canada selling books for the Seventh-day Adventist conference.
Yeah.
They're just going around selling books, okay? They come back. Now, Bertil, the mother, she was working domestically for a family who were from Martinique, where they're from. And so they had told her that, bring your family over. We'll help you guys get started. They were gonna come to America. So he does. The family comes down, but that family went back to Martinique, and they stayed for 2 months. And so her family had come in town, and she couldn't put them up over at those people's houses, so she asked my wife if they could stay with us. And when we said sure, and it was like 8 of them. So they came and took over my downstairs, and it was like there were 2 bedrooms and a huge rec room area, and there was a bathroom down there, but of course there was 2 more upstairs. But my house has never been so clean as when that family lived in my house.
Yeah. They
just darling people, And we know them all today. Bertil went back to Martinique, her and her husband, and then her husband passed. But she's still over there in Martinique. And Jude is one of those 6 kids. And I'll tell you, man, all of them. We still know all of them. We still, they're just a great bunch of grown up now. But I say kids because they're just so much younger than me. And they all turned out well. They all turned out well. And I loved it. I love them to death.
All right, Roy.
But that was our growth. I mean, that was our meeting. That here a mother and a father and 6 kids came to live in our house for, I guess, close to a year, and then we assisted them in getting a house, and then I was able to be affect the father to get a job, help the father to get a job, and it was it's a great story, and one of them needs to write it. One of them, Jude, probably needs to write a story about all of them, because all the kids have married and had kids and grandkids now, and it's just a wonderful family.
Well, Roy, I can tell you this. I mean, I can guarantee you once this show goes up, and the show will be posted here in the next few days, but it will be emailed to everybody that votes in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if that'll matter or not, but I think your story is one that needs to be heard. And I think if a Hall of Fame voter, no matter their age, whether they saw you play or not, if they're going because they heard you were a malcontent or a rebel, all they have to do is look at the way you've lived your life. And if they can look at that and still think that you're a rebel and a malcontent, they have no clue what's going on. The NFL was different in the 60s, and I think you were considered a rebel because you actually weren't afraid to speak your mind. And I think that's where people, where it hurts you a little bit. And that is absolutely asinine because the way you've lived your life is this. And this is the thing that I would really push. If you're not a Hall of Fame football player, you're definitely a Hall of Fame man, Roy.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
But, all right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up. I want to remind everybody they can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So, for Roy Jefferson, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.